All right, Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business, My Father's Place Radio. This is a song called Becoming.
And knocked you off your feet. Then they turned around and asked you what you need. And if you change your mind and offer some forgiveness, that's a start. Lonely times will come and go, but they will help you see how to survive and live your life from within.
All right, Richard Solomon in the studio with the band Vista Hill. They will be performing at My Father's Place at the Rosin Hotel, and we were lucky enough to grab them pretty much before they went down the road a little bit, down Northern Boulevard, and got them into the studio, and we're sharing great stories, great music, great passion for music, and a little bit about history. So let's talk about the history of this album being produced and how it's a little bit different from maybe what you've done in the past, especially, given 40 years of, music and musicianship. And I'm sure, many years ago there was no Facebook, YouTube, or, things like that. So how has the process changed? Is it easier and harder, both less? I hear all kinds of things from people. Give me your take.
Well, number one of the reasons why I wanted to build my own studio was to avoid all the time constraints that you have when you're working in someone else's studio.
And the slapping.
So, I built a good studio, good sound, good equipment. And one of the things that's different from some of these other studios is that everyone is now using plugins, software to actually enhance and change and modify all the audio, as opposed to all the old hardware that was out there, which is great, but honestly,
it's not as authentic.
The plugins aren't as authentic as a CLA 76 compressor that was, that now would cost $10,000, but you really can't tell the difference. People who say that they can, most of them are lying. So with the equipment that we have and with the software that we have, we're able to produce a high quality recording, and we have all day to do it. We don't have a 4-hour window. We don't have a 2-hour. We don't have someone coming right behind us where we've got to get out. That made things easier. It enabled us to expand the creative process.
Well, the other advantage that no one realizes is you can leave all your stuff.
Yes.
No one will, your settings are set, your equipment is, your notes, whatever. You can kind of just leave it, take a break, and then all your stuff is exactly where it needs to be. Whereas if you're sharing space, other people's food and beverages, notes and stuff is all over the place. Because, it's like here at the station, after you do your show, you got to take, your equipment and leave. Whereas when I record in other places where it's more of a permanent thing for myself, everything's already set. I just turn the equipment on and the levels are right, and, everything is just perfect, and all my notes and everything that I use is all just, there. Nothing has to be reset, retimed, or recalibrated.
Right.
I feel it's a double-edged sword. It certainly made things more accessible with today's computers and software. We have a system, and I know other people that do it, if they're looking for a flute player. What they'll do, there's a website that lists all these different people, and there could be a flute player in Brazil that you send the tracks to, and then he lays down his track and he sends it to you. No one has to be in the room. You could just do this globally and create your own sound. If I'm singing and all of a sudden it sounds great except for that one little note that I was off key, well, Mark goes in and he magnifies it and he sees, oh, there it is, you went a little too high on that. Click, drag it out, drag it down, and now I'm perfect.
Within reason.
Within reason.
You can't. Something that's bad is hard.
You can't take Rich Solomon and make him into Pavarotti.
It's not gonna. It's not going to work.
We could try.
So I think that's the double-edged sword, that it makes it so accessible, and that's where you see on YouTube all of these young artists and what they're able to do. But the music business has changed because they can't take a risk on these young people. They'll take a risk if the guy has 200,000 hits on YouTube. And at that point, they don't even have to go in the studio. They're expecting that kid to already have, because he did it in his studio, a perfectly made track so they can market.
The other thing is, one of the things you lose, because we have the ability to record track by track and overdub, so you put a rhythm track down, put a vocal track down, put a guitar track down, all not at the same time, you lose a little bit of
The coordination?
well, the spontaneity,
Spontaneity.
and having a live performance. So, for example, when I record down there with a jazz band, if you don't have that, you're not going to have a good recording. So you have to record live there. You can't record individual tracks. And so there's a little bit of a downside there that you have to just do it one after another. You lose a little bit of the interpersonal, the interaction that you have when you play, which is what you have on a stage.
Right, and the feedback to some extent.
Yeah.
People encourage you, or they say, oh, a little bit more, pick this up, or
Right,
whatever.
right.
It's funny, there's like certain artists. I remember like James Taylor did a duet with himself that I saw this live. It was kind of funny. He had like a reel-to-reel tape, and I guess he had himself pre-recorded, but then he did a duet with himself.
How'd it sound?
It sounded great, but I can't imagine you doing an entire album of that. Maybe a song or two,
Yeah.
and it works, and it's innovative and novel and things like that. But you do hear musicians where you hear them play every single instrument and they put it together. But I can't imagine that you want a career like that.
Agreed.
It's like I can't do a show that's just monologue. It wouldn't
Right,
work.
right.
I need you guys. I need stories, content, passion, creativity, and that comes from the guests. I'm just here to sort of get it out of you.
And there's nothing cooler. There's nothing cooler when you're performing, and I know, looking at the audience, that Mark's going to come in on this, and he's got my back. And if I mess up on something, I'm just going to give him a look, and he's just going to keep looping it until I can kind of catch up. It's that camaraderie of playing together that everybody's kind of got your back, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Now, when you record in the studio, is it just you guys, or do you ever have other people there to sort of give you a little bit of criticism, or a little bit of a vibe, a little bit of the excitement of fans, whether it's family or friends?
We typically don't have anyone down there, and we'll play what we have, up to a point for some people and get their critique. But I don't personally like to have outsiders in the studio critiquing, moment by moment. It just
You play differently, you sing differently. It's a different vibe when people are watching. You can't kind of separate and kind of get in your own head. It's kind of like when people go out to restaurants and everybody's all of a sudden a food critic. Well, when they're watching you perform, everybody's now all of a sudden a music critic. Phil Collins say, Mark, if you just kind of slow that down just a little bit, you might. So, it's fun, but it's not as productive as when we're together. And we're actually together for a very limited time. We're together when we're putting together the rhythm tracks, the drum and the bass. But after that, those guys can go if they want to. And then all of a sudden you start laying down these individual tracks.
What is it like to master an album? I've always wanted to know, you hear about sort of mastering and remastering, and
Yeah.
How Jimmy Page kind of remastered all the Zeppelin songs, and what is actually done with that?
Well, what's interesting is I just I'm in the middle of a master's program at NYU for jazz studies, but one of the electives that I took was in mastering, done by someone. His name is Alan Tucker, who pretty much masters all the jazz albums that are produced today, and he also had worked on some old albums. And one of the first things that he showed us, Al Cooper, the original singer for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which was a great band, even before Clayton Thomas came in. Al Cooper was never happy with Child is Father to the Man, that album. He came to Alan Tucker and wanted him to remaster it. So they have the original files. And the problem was that on vinyl, there's only so much data that you can put in there. So they were limited. So the bass didn't sound quite as full. The horns didn't sound quite as sweet. It takes more data digitally to get in there. So he remastered it, and it just sounded umpteen times better. It's an art. It's a skill. It's a very tedious skill. I don't master. I'll get down to a stereo track, and then send it to someone who has real good chops when it comes to mastering.
But what are the people? I guess what I'd like to know is, for the people out there like myself, what the people who do the mastering, what do they actually do? Well, and how do they do it?
If there's a simple answer to that, it's in today's music, it's making it louder. So what they'll do is they'll take the parts that are not that loud and
Enhance
they'll be louder. And so everything gets compressed in a kind of a one volume wavelength. That's so they can turn up the volume and not break the speakers. So everything that you hear is just loud. But that really destroys the quality of the music. And that's why you don't hear classical music being played like that. They don't compress the way masters compress now. But there's more to it than that. There's fine-tuning the individual instruments if they can. Fine-tuning the frequencies. The higher frequencies, they're going to bring those down. They may bring the lower frequencies up. That's what the process of mastering is. It's fading in. It's fading out.
And one thing I will tell you, this Thursday, Mark will be teaching. Part of our gig is Mark spends about a half hour in front of the audience teaching them about recording and mastering. So look forward to that.
So when you put an album together, how do you decide the order of tracks? And is that like a rock, paper, scissors thing, or is it consensus?
No, it's Sherman decides it, period.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yay.
So let me ask you, how do you decide which is the lead song?
It's usually, it's not the most popular song. For me, you're building up, just like when you're creating a set list. You want to start building it up and then give the audience a chance to relax, and then build it up again and relax just a little bit, and now you're at the end of the gig, and now you want something powerful, and why most bands are going to end with something really powerful. So there is a little bit of a science to it.
So when you do it, is it gut or is it reasoned, or a little bit of both?
Probably more gut
Okay.
than anything else, I would say.
See, so I always love asking creative people their process, because everybody approaches things so differently, and every group of musicians has their own chemistry and protocols.
There is a school of thought that because of the limited attention span of today's listeners, you put your best song first. Because if you don't put your best song first, and if they don't like the first song, they're not going to listen to the rest of it. People, because they're not going to do what we did, which is put an album on the turntable and listen to the A side, listen to the B side. People don't do it anymore.
And we thrived on that, both A side and B side.
Look, I remember a long time ago, you would listen to an album and you actually had to get used to it. You know what I'm saying? You had to and then you kind of like
You were courting it.
Your brain is your hard drive is actually trying to pick up. And I remember certain albums like War Child and Aqualung, and listening, Minstrel in the Gallery, and like listening to them, and then trying to discover the nuances of the songs, and then looking at the lyrics, and then maybe looking at the album art, because in those days it was more of an integrated experience.
Totally.
It wasn't just listening. It was you watched sort of almost the turntable as if it did something. You looked at the album cover. Sometimes the sleeve had lyrics on it. Sometimes on the sleeve there was a subdued artwork, and you wanted to see what the artwork was, whether it gave you clues to the meanings of the songs, and the artwork was big enough to actually appreciate where, when it went to a CD format, what may have been something like, very, very easy to see, maybe a little compressed, a little harder to see. Maybe they had maybe like some of the albums were like triple fold, and really, and here you're going from a triple fold to something much smaller. Something got like Thick as a Brick was like a newspaper, and I don't know how you take something like Thick as a Brick and then stream it and then get the same.
All that's gone.
Yeah,
it's a lost art. It's gone.
In addition, you listen to an album. In the old days, you listen to an album, and if you listen to it enough, you have a feeling about when this song ends, that song begins. They're part of the same. It's the brothers process.
And sisters. They're siblings.
Family.
Because that's what Ian Anderson said. They're like brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting. In some ways, the skips, the pops, the hisses, actually brought something very authentic to the music. Actually, what was really funny is Dennis McNamara told me a great story. Dennis McNamara, for the people who are listening, was the program director of WLIR. We had him, and he's up on our YouTube site. And he tells this great story. He was driving to WLIR. He was I guess, getting coffee, and I guess he was listening, and he heard shk, 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 and that was just going on the air. It's like shk, shk. He's like, oh, what? And I said, I know what that is. That's the last part of the album going back and repeating because
Right.
the album's over.
Right.
So apparently the DJ passed out. The album was going shk. He revived the guy, and they had to like go back to the music.
Oh, my.
But that really wouldn't exist anymore because it would go to the next track, the next sequence. Like even on YouTube, it'll autoplay something, even if you don't pick something.
I thought your shik was boom boom boodle.
I think you think as a musician, this was just like the music ran out and then the DJ, but it's sort of interesting. We only have 2.5 minutes left. What else could I share with all the people out there who are your fans and the people who will become your fans? What should they know that they haven't heard about the album, about you guys, about your passion, about your music, about your recording process?
A lot of people ask us where we got the name Vista Hill.
Okay.
And back in the day, I loved to ride my bicycle. And I lived in Great Neck, and I would do whatever number of miles. I'd like to say 70 miles, but it was probably 7 miles. And I always ended up going and riding up Vista Hill in Great Neck. And if you look at Vista Hill, even if you're in a car, you shake your head and you say, I don't think I can make it. And so I would be on my bicycle and I'd be riding up Vista Hill, and there'd be one guy on my shoulder representing my dad who would say, you can't do it. You're not going to be able to do it. And there'd be another guy on my shoulder saying, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Keep riding, keep riding. And that was the genesis for the band's name and the song that I wrote called Vista Hill.
Now it's interesting. You must have been a fan of Bugs Bunny because there was always like the good, the good guy and the devil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No names.
So, all right. So you'll be performing at My Father's Place.
Yes.
At
looking forward to it.
myfathersplace.com and vistahillband.com. And is there any like email or Facebook or something like that to contact you to tell you how great you were when the people actually hear
We
you?
love hearing from people, so just go on Facebook and just say, hey, we heard you and we thought you were great, and we'll see you next Thursday. We'll be on around 9 o'clock.
All right. And for the people who are listening in the future, and this is history, it was a great show, and we'll probably have them back. So there you go.
Thanks so
All right,
much,
We're
Rich.
going to like close out with "I Know a Girl."
Let's do Vista Hill.
Where's Vista Hill? Where's that?
From Looking for Tara, is it not?
I'm not sure. It should be on there. I hope it's on there. Otherwise, we'll have to sing it in the studio.
There we go. Let's just play this because we only have a second. See, this is because we don't have a crack staff. It's just me. All right. For those out there who are listening, have a great week.
Love's been raining down on me.